From where you're kneeling must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Fallout New Vegas is a separate story that takes place a few years after Fallout 3, but it doesn't require knowing anything from the earlier games to really follow what happens. I mean, it would help, but it stands on its own because the Mojave has its own problems, its own history, and a set of characters that don't rely on the events from the Capital Wasteland. It's actually a lot more connected to the original games. But like I said, it still stands on its own. New Vegas gained its reputation because of how it handles decision making. Instead of giving one clear good path, the game presents different groups that each believe they know how to rebuild the Mojave. Every group wants something different, and the way they treat the people living in the region depends on the path they choose. The writing takes these conflicts seriously and never treats the Mojave like a simple battleground. The leaders argue, towns struggle to stay alive, and no one is completely right or completely wrong. That, in my opinion, is why people fell in love with this game. The decisions you make have actual weight to them. We wanted to make this video for the people who are new to the Fallout series and enjoy the show, but maybe they just haven't played the games. Or maybe you just need a refresher because it's been that long. This overview will give you the pieces needed to understand what the hell is actually going on in this game. Each major faction will be explained in plain terms, along with the characters who are important to the decisions around them. The Courier story sets up the main conflict, and the details behind the chip, the strip, and Hoover Dam show how everything fits together. This will give anyone planning to watch the Amazon show a clear foundation for Season 2, since the Mojave has a long history of struggles that all changes when new characters step into it. If you guys enjoy Fallout, then you're definitely in the right place. We have a ton of content on the channel already and a lot more to come, so consider subbing. We also have a Discord, so if you want to talk about Fallout and gaming with some like-minded people, then join us with the link in the description. Thanks for watching and enjoy the vid.
The Mojave is a huge stretch of land that covers parts of California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. People call it the Mojave Wasteland now, but it still keeps a lot of what made the old desert tough and open. It didn't get wiped out like other places during the Great War, and that changed everything. When the bombs were fired at Las Vegas, a smart and wealthy man named Robert House had already prepared for this. He had defense systems on the Lucky 38 and launch platforms across the region that knocked out or disabled most of the incoming warheads. Fortunately, only a handful landed, and they landed far away from the main city. Because of his plan, the Mojave didn't break apart the way the other places did, and by 2281, which is 4 years after Fallout 3's events, the Mojave doesn't look all that bad. That kept roads, bridges, power sites, and other important infrastructure intact, which pulled people into the region later on. Raiders, tribals, wanderers, super mutants, they all moved in when nobody else claimed the area. Vegas sat untouched for almost 2 centuries while overgrowth and small groups drifted in and out. Even the Brotherhood passed through here on different missions, and some settlers believed strange stories about what could be hidden underneath the desert. The land filled with odd groups. Super mutants under Marcus stayed in Black Mountain before moving to Jacobstown. The Great Khans pulled back into Red Rock Canyon. Good Springs and Prim stayed standing as small town stops. Convicts from the old NCR prison turned into powder gangers and caused trouble across the highways. The Fiends brought violence to the outer edges of Vegas, and Nightkin roamed mountains and destroyed radio towers. Caravans tried to keep trade going through all of this, pushing along roads that still connected one part of the region to another. The land itself stays open, but constantly shifting. Snow sits on the cliffs around Jacobstown while pine trees cover the high mountain slopes. Red Rock Canyon glows with color. Valleys stay dry but packed with old plants and mutated creatures that moved into abandoned places. Places like Black Mountain, Sloan, the Divide Wreckage, the 188 Trading Post, Scorpion Gulches, and dry lake beds form the pathways between these groups. Lake Mead and the Colorado River cut through the desert and bring in cleaner water than people expect after a nuclear war. If you look around, villages around these areas hold on to independence the best they can, such as the Kings in Freeside, the Followers in their clinics, North Vegas Square, West Side, and other packed neighborhoods trying to protect whoever lives inside. The farther you walk, the more you feel how many different groups are trying to hold on to their ground here. Gunrunners supply weapons. Crimson Caravan work trade routes. Traders stay active at the 188 even after travel gets unsafe. Every valley between mountain peaks has something going on, from hidden ranches to farms trying to grow food. Even in dangerous areas, wildlife continues to survive. Coyotes, bighorners, and Brahmin move through the region. Rad scorpions and night stalkers come from experiments at Big MT, and you still see birds and fish near the river. Plants like the agave, banana yucca, and mushrooms grow in different zones, which means people can still forage. Water pockets stay cleaner than expected, as I mentioned before, and that actually keeps settlements alive. This land also feeds into a political struggle that never really slows down. The NCR wants control of the Strip and every outpost tied to the region. The Legion wants a new capital and the water at Hoover Dam. House wants his city strong and separate from both sides. Every person caught between factions has to deal with taxes, raids, patrols, convoys, and checkpoints. If you listen closely, you'll find that soldiers argue about orders, while leaders disagree about strategy. Traders complain about fees, and people in Free Side and West Side try to survive while the bigger forces watch each other. The Mojave acts and feels like a giant pressure cooker where three powers wait for a chance to push forward without getting caught off guard by the third side. The Strip sits in the center of this entire situation. House rebuilt it after waking from a long period trapped in his own systems. He reached out to tribals living in the ruins and turned them into the Omertas, the Chairmen, and the White Glove Society. As you walk around the Strip, you'll notice that they each took over a casino and live under his rules. House also won Vault 21 in a gambling match, cleared it, and kept a small section as a hotel while filling the rest with concrete to protect key systems. Walls went up around the Strip to keep danger out, and when the NCR discovered this bright city in the middle of nowhere, they were stunned that it still functioned. They wanted to take it, but couldn't risk a fight, so House forced a treaty that protected his territory. He kept control, took a share of Hoover Dam's power, and let NCR citizens gamble without interference. Inside the Strip, Securitrons patrol every section. The NCR MPs have a presence, but House keeps the real authority behind the Lucky 38's locked doors. The three families act polite on the outside but carry grudges. Some members drift toward old habits, and Benny plans to take everything for himself. Perhaps the most critical monument in the valley is the Hoover Dam, which sits near the eastern edge, holding back Lake Mead and sending energy throughout the region. It only survived because House's old systems stopped incoming warheads before they could reach it. NCR engineers got it running again after they arrived, and then the Legion attacked in the first battle of Hoover Dam, but lost after being lured into a trap in Boulder City. Since then, both sides watch the dam constantly, because taking it would decide who dominates the entire area. Workers and contractors as well as soldiers move through its halls trying to keep everything operating. But you'll notice that the NCR lands stretch from Mojave Outpost to Prim, Camp McCarran, Camp Searchlight, Helios 1, and every checkpoint linked to their supply lines. So you could say they have partial control in some areas and full control in others. Mojave Outpost acts as their border site, guiding caravans and sending rangers across the desert. They deal with slow paperwork, broken patrol schedules, pressure from the Legion on one side, powder gangers on the other, and orders from leaders who don't always agree. Many soldiers complain that they are told to hold ground instead of pushing forward, which just keeps them stuck in these long type of standoffs. However, east of the Colorado River sits Legion territory. Fortification Hill holds Caesar and his guards and the bulk of his forces. Camps across the river support raiding parties and prepare for the next push toward Hoover Dam. Coincidentally, the fort also hides a buried Securitron vault that Caesar does not know exists. And anyone approaching the fort without permission gets attacked unless they carry the mark given during key story events. Every camp stays ready for war, waiting for Caesar's command in the moment when the Legion decides to strike again. In a nutshell, the Mojave Wasteland is a complex mess, but it all works meticulously.
So what the hell is actually going on in this game, you might be wondering? Who are we, as in the character we're playing as, and what effects can you have on the Mojave and New Vegas' story? Well, you start out as a courier, Courier 6 to be exact. And everything in this story starts with the courier getting dragged into a job they didn't ask for. They were hired to deliver a platinum poker chip. It looked like a regular delivery, and there wasn't any warning that the job was tied to power struggles across the Mojave. The courier didn't even know who created the chip or what it controlled, and they had no idea the wrong person holding it could cause the kind of trouble that was coming. They just picked up the package and headed out like any other run, and that's when everything went wrong for them. A crew intercepted them, knocked them down, tied them up, took the chip, and then tried to finish the job by putting a bullet in their head. Well, your head, really. The person behind this little ambush was a man named Benny, the head of the chairman on the Strip. He used Great Khans as muscle during the ambush, and the courier only survived because a lone Securitron robot named Victor dug you out of your grave, and then Doc Mitchell and Goodsprings patched you up. And those two people are the only ones at the time that know you're alive, and that push the events towards everything that follows. From that moment forward, the courier wanted answers about the attack. and why the chip mattered enough to kill over it. The Platinum chip wasn't a map, a keycard, or some random item. It was designed by Mr. House to control tech that predated the Great War, and the scale of that tech placed it at the center of the fight over New Vegas. It upgrades the Securitron systems in the Lucky 38, and it also unlocks a hidden Securitron bunker at Fortification Hill. The Securitrons are the robot force House uses to control Vegas, and using the chip upgrades them to super death mode instead of just regular death mode basically. Anyone who wanted full control of New Vegas treated the chip as a key part of their plans. Whoever activated the chip could turn that system into support for their own rule. And that's why people were willing to take extreme steps to get it. Losing it meant giving someone else control over a force strong enough to defend the strip or even take it from the current ruler in one move. The Courier wasn't linked to any faction when the story began. They weren't tied to the NCR, Caesar's Legion, or Mr. House. They didn't really owe anyone anything, and nobody knew their personal history. Well, except for one guy, but we won't get into all of that. That blank slate makes your role important because every major leader wanted to recruit them once they realized the Courier was still alive. Each group needed someone who could travel through the Mojave and handle the chip when the moment came. That put the Courier in a position where your choices actually changed who might gain power and who lost it. Knowing this before Season 2 matters because the entire conflict connects to who controls New Vegas, and access to pre-war systems that are linked to the chip. The Courier's survival cut into plans already in motion, and we'll find out how exactly this Courier ended up changing the Mojave, and there are a lot of moving parts in this game. This is essentially what the New Vegas story is like. You as the Courier will meet large factions and groups and decide to either join them in this fight for New Vegas or be their destruction. All leading up to the Battle of the Hoover Dam, with multiple leaders and factions vying for control of it. Did the Courier help the NCR, Caesar's Legion, House, or even possibly themselves? An answer that we will definitely get when Season 2 hits, whether we like it or not. If you're new to Fallout or New Vegas, you're probably a little confused at all of these faction names and people. Don't worry, we're going to cover all the major players so that you can understand exactly what's going on.
There are a few key characters to know. Mr. House is the person who sits at the top of New Vegas, even if nobody has seen him outside the Lucky 38 in more than 200 years. Before the bombs, he built Robco Industries and became one of the richest and smartest people on the planet. He bought companies, pushed new tech, and used huge math models to figure out where the world was heading. Those calculations convinced him that a nuclear war would hit the US. With that in mind, he spent his time setting up defenses by planning for impact and building a system to keep himself alive long after the explosion. He placed his body inside a life support machine that ran off his own network of computers, and somehow his brain stayed connected to the systems that controlled the city. And because he cared about the survival of Las Vegas more than anything else, he designed his machines to shoot down incoming warheads or knock them out of the sky before they could flatten the region. He planned his work around the Platinum chip, a small device that carried an upgraded operating system meant for his Securitrons and his laser defenses. He expected the chip to arrive hours before the bombs hit, but his timing was off by that small margin. When the world ended, the chip was still in a delivery chain, leaving him running everything on outdated software that kept crashing and forcing him to fight throughout failures. He stayed conscious for a while, but eventually slipped into a coma as the systems glitched. The ruins of Vegas sat quiet while he lay dormant, and the city turned into a home for tribals and whoever else wandered through. Now, as we know, House woke up decades later and began searching for signs of organized groups near the Mojave. When his sensors detected NCR scouts, he knew the world outside had rebuilt enough to matter again. He sent his Securitrons out to make contact, and once he confirmed the NCR was real and moving into the area, he reached out to the tribes living in the crumbled streets. He offered them deals and direction. 3 of the tribes, of course, accepted. He reshaped them into the Chairman, the White Glove Society, and the Omertas, and they rebuilt their casinos and agreed to operate under his rules. When the NCR arrived in force, House convinced them to sign a treaty that let them use McCarran Airport and receive the majority of Hoover Dam's power. In exchange, he kept total control of the strip. But Mr. House is brilliant, and his plan kept pushing forward from there. He spent caps looking for the Platinum chip buried in the wasteland, hiring scavengers and sending out search teams until it finally surfaced after more than 2 centuries. When he secured its delivery, he hired several couriers to hide the chip's real importance. One of them carried the actual item. House viewed that person, known as the Courier, as the last step in unlocking his next phase of New Vegas. He believed the upgraded Securitron army would give him the future he envisioned, a city run by his guidance, free from mistakes he believed ruined the old world. His focus today stays locked on calculated outcomes and making sure no other power shapes Vegas the way he intends to. His goal is controlled growth, and all he cares about is the success of his city. Benny, however, wanted something different. He grew up as part of the Boot Riders, a tribe with its own way of living until House came into the picture. When House reshaped the tribes into the 3 families, Benny's group became the chairman and took over the Tops Casino. They wore suits, ran a casino, cleaned up their style, and always used the word baby.
Either way, baby, this is good news. Maybe I can finally sleep at night, knowing you didn't die.
Benny saw the strip as an opportunity, and it has the best shot at gaining real power. His tribe's old chief didn't agree, so Benny fought him, won, and then took charge. He built his whole reputation as someone who could charm his way through problems, but also eliminate anyone who stood in the way. He was also kind of savvy. He learned about House's reliance on the platinum chip and the secret vault under the fort through a damaged Securitron that he gained access to. Emily reprogrammed the robot for him, turning it into the machine later called Yes Man. With that new control, Benny dug deep into House's network and figured out exactly what the chip could unlock. He started connecting the dots and realized that whoever held the chip could upgrade the entire Securitron force. Now, that's a lot of power, and with that kind of control, he believed he could replace House and run New Vegas his own way. He found out about the couriers hired to carry decoy packages and worked out which courier held the real one. He hired great cons to help him pull off the job, and when the courier reached Goodsprings, Benny ambushed them, took the chip, shot them, and left them buried in a shallow grave.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
He returned to the Tops and surrounded himself with bodyguards while he waited for his next step. What he didn't expect was that the courier would survive and make their way to the strip.
What in the goddamn? Let's keep this in the groove, hey? Smooth moves like smooth little babies.
House, of course, knew too, through his Securitron hidden in Goodsprings. Benny kept acting like he was a step ahead, but he was about to face the fallout of what he started. Now, back to Yes Man. Yes Man fits into all this because Benny turned him into a tool that always agrees. He's a Securitron with programming that forces him to follow any order given to him, no matter who speaks to him. That makes him extremely helpful, but also unpredictable around anyone who knows how to use him. Yes Man cheerfully shares every detail he knows, which is a lot since Benny made him crawl through House's databases. He learned every route, every plan, and every contingency House had stored. He was literally a walking library of knowledge.
Good question. My function is to monitor Mr. House's data network and decode his encrypted transmission.
Yes Man helped Benny work out where to attack the courier and when the chip would pass through Goodsprings, and of course knew how to avoid triggering alarms. Once Benny left him in the Tops, Yes Man waited for new instructions. When the courier eventually reaches him, he explains Benny's full plan and offers to help the courier instead. Because he cannot refuse any request, he backs whatever path the courier chooses. If they want control of New Vegas without House or the NCR or the Legion, Yes Man assists and guides them through every step. He explains how to use the chip to upgrade the Securitrons, where to find electrical stations, and how to gather or remove smaller groups in the Mojave. Yes Man takes orders with a cheerful tone even when the situation is dangerous. He stays positive, not because he tries to be uplifting, but because his programming doesn't let him do anything else. In the end, he becomes a doorway to an independent future of Vegas, where the courier can call the shots with an army of machines ready to support whatever decisions they make.
Caesar is the creator and leader of Caesar's Legion. He built his power by taking control of tribes east of the Colorado River. He turned them into one army and later pushed that force towards the Mojave. His ideas come from old world history he studied when he was known as Edward Sallow, and he worked with the followers of the Apocalypse. He uses that history as a plan for how he wants people to live and how wars should work. This guides how the Legion trains fighters and how they deal with groups that end up under their control. He views New Vegas as a key part of his Mojave campaign. Hoover Dam and the Strip connect to a larger plan that goes past the Mojave, and he thinks the NCR repeats old mistakes that weaken them. He sees Mr. House as someone stuck in a version of the world that ended a long time ago. Caesar is also dealing with a brain tumor during this time, which creates some awkward questions about his role in the future of the Legion. Because of this, Legate Lanius handles more of the military side as the Legion prepares for the next stage of the conflict. Caesar views himself as someone who understands why the old world fell, and he believes the Legion can replace what came before, if he completes his plans in the Mojave. He's incredibly smart and manipulative. He knew exactly how to turn those tribes into his war force, and his plan is to expand into every territory. On the other side of that coin, General Lee Oliver represents the NCR's push into the Mojave. He directs NCR control of Hoover Dam and the locations tied to it. The NCR wants land that can support expanding towns and settlements, and Oliver's job is to hold the Mojave while fighting a war that is critically draining their resources. His focus on the dam comes from how the first battle played out. The Rangers and Chief Hanlon were given most of the credit for that fight. and Oliver didn't receive the recognition he wanted. So now he's butthurt and wants to prove that it will be him that wins the war for the NCR. The NCR currently holds Hoover Dam as a resource that supports their territory with power and water. Oliver answers to leaders who sit far from the Mojave, but still expects steady progress. This puts him in a spot where he has to deal with supply issues and strip politics while Legion forces apply pressure across the area. He also works with NCR figures in the Mojave, like Colonel Shu at Camp McCarran, who handles security and intelligence, and then you have Ambassador Crocker, who deals with strip talks. Each of them handles different parts of the region as the NCR tries to keep a steady hold on the Mojave. Oliver and the leadership around him sit at the center of how the NCR handles the dam and the land tied to it. They think of the dam as something the Republic needs to reach its long-term goals. Those were some of the leaders and strong figures that you'll run across in the game. But what are these groups and armies underneath them? The NCR is a growing democracy from the West Coast. It began with small settlements that wanted a government able to support towns and keep people stable after the Great War. As the NCR grew in California, it expanded east and reached the Mojave. The NCR sees the Mojave as land that can help support its population back home, and they're trying to bring laws and structure based on the ideas taken from pre-war governments. They talk about bringing order, but doing that becomes a challenge as they move farther from their main territory. Their officers deal with long travel routes and slow communication that creates problems for units in the field. President Kimball promotes the Mojave campaign as a sign of NCR strength, but the reality is that they're overexpanded and struggling in this specific wasteland. Inside the NCR, different officials push their own approaches to the Mojave, and that leads to decisions that don't always match what the local units need. Soldiers across the region deal with these issues while trying to keep towns and posts functioning. NCR forces around the Mojave deal with steady pressure. Camp McCarran manages security and intelligence, and ranger stations track hostile groups moving through the region. These posts face attacks that drain their supplies, and officers try to keep their units prepared when support arrives slower than expected. Leaders back west want progress while dealing with reports that reach them after delays. Hoover Dam stays at the center of the NCR's plans, since it provides power and water for their territory, and that is their main focus. Outside of this game and the current canon events taking place in the show, by the way, this is a spoiler for Season 1, so skip this part if you don't want to know. Basically, we know that the NCR capital in California was destroyed. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty details because really we're talking about the events taking place in New Vegas's timeline. But I think that information is now extremely crucial for what we're about to see happen to the NCR in Season 2. It'll be interesting. Let's move on to Caesar's Legion. The Legion is built on strict rules shaped by Caesar's view of old world history. The Legion formed from groups east of the Colorado that Caesar brought under one system, as we know. People brought in are required to follow orders, and the Legion enforces this with discipline that keeps their structure firm. Caesar based this system on an old Roman material he studied as Edward Sallow, and these lessons guide how the Legion moves across the land that they target. The Legion depends on Caesar for direction, and his role really keeps the group functioning. Fighters look to him when the Legion advances into new areas, but Caesar's health problems add uncertainty to the structure he built, since authority inside the Legion really centers around him. Legate Lanius directs the Mojave campaign as Caesar's chosen war leader, but Caesar remains the figure the Legion treats as the source of its purpose. Lanius is more of a savage and a war dog. If he was in command of the Legion, it would probably fall apart. Legion fighters train for close-range combat and long travel, which helps them in battles that rely on direct contact. Groups that are absorbed into the Legion are forced to follow the same rules placed on Legion ranks. The territory they control east of the Colorado gives them a strong base, and their advance toward the Mojave places them into conflict with the major groups in the region. They have slaves, crucify people they deem as profligates or heathens. Everything for them is about control. Some people believe there is safety within their brutal control systems, and that maybe an order like that could bring some stability back to a chaotic wasteland.
When you start looking at the factions in New Vegas, the first thing to understand is that every group has its own version of what the Mojave should look like. Some want order, some want profit, some want survival, and some just want everyone else to leave them alone. Mr. House sits at the top of this list because he believes the best version of New Vegas is the one he controls personally. He isn't trying to rebuild the Mojave through kindness or charity. He cares about stability, clean tech, efficient systems, long-term plans that stretch way beyond the lifetime of anyone outside his casino tower. To him, the Strip is the center of a future he has mapped out down to the smallest detail. Every faction and every tribe, along with every outsider, is just another piece he needs arranged the right way. His vision isn't about freedom or shared power, it's about order. He wants Las Vegas to last for hundreds of years, and he believes that can only happen under a single hand, which of course is his. Yes Man offers the exact opposite. Instead of one person calling the shots, Yes Man exists to make it possible for the Courier to remove every major group from the top of the food chain and run the Mojave without being owned by the big three, aka the NCR, the Legion, or House. Yes Man isn't loyal to a cause or a government. He's loyal to whatever the Courier wants because his programming doesn't let him disagree. That turns him into the doorway for an independent New Vegas, one where the outcome isn't decided by big armies or strict leaders.
Then I'd have to help you. I mean, it seems pretty obvious Benny wouldn't want me to, but hey, not my fault I can't say no.
Instead, the future depends on the choices of one person who survived a bullet to the head. Yes Man clears the board so the Courier can shape the Mojave in a way none of the big powers would ever allow. He's kind of a wild card because he represents what happens when no one gets to dominate the map anymore. Then you have the Boomers, who are basically a tribe that took the idea of leave us alone to the highest possible level. They started in Vault 34 with a huge weapons stockpile, fought their way out, and eventually settled at Nellis Air Force Base. Once they got inside, they rebuilt everything, powered the base, planted crops, and built a whole society without needing help from anyone. You could say as a group, they're extremely independent. They added artillery that can hit anything coming near their fence, and because of that, no one bothers them. Their whole culture revolves around independence through firepower and the belief that if you want peace, you need enough explosives to scare the world into backing off. They don't really trade or negotiate, and they don't join teams. They only care about the bomber in Lake Mead and keeping Nellis safe. They have one of the strongest arsenals in the Mojave, and everyone else knows it. The Brotherhood of Steel is almost the opposite. They hide underground to stay out of sight and refuse to open their doors unless absolutely necessary. Their bunker is buried in Hidden Valley, and they operate on the belief that advanced tech should be protected, even if that means taking it away from everybody else. After losing a war with the NCR, they barely have enough members left to patrol at night. They live on rationed supplies with strict rules and non-stop drills. They still have power armor and laser rifles, but their biggest struggle is inside the bunker itself. Their leader wants them to stay hidden so the NCR doesn't wipe them out, while other members think hiding will eventually kill their chapter anyway. They're not necessarily trying to run New Vegas because they can't afford to. They just want to survive long enough to rebuild their strength even if the rest of the Mojave forgets they ever existed. Then we have the Great Khans. The Great Khans used to be one of the strongest tribes in the West, but by the time we meet them, they're a broken group living in Red Rock Canyon after being pushed out of Vegas and hammered by the NCR. And to be honest, a lot of them resent the NCR because of this.
We don't really use the chems ourselves, just sell them to anybody with the caps. If it ends up hurting the NCR in the process, that's a bonus.
Sure, they try to keep their culture alive with their own laws and their own initiation rituals in their own style, but most of their power now comes from drug production. They learned chemistry from the followers and turned it into a business trading chems for supplies. They're not mindless raiders, but they're worn down and desperate for a future that isn't just running from stronger armies. And this is why Caesar's Legion targets them, with sweet-sounding promises of land and revenge. The Khans want to matter again, and that need makes them one of the most sad collectives in the Mojave. The followers of the apocalypse sit at the other end of the spectrum. They're more noble. They don't want land or power. They want to teach people how to farm, how to build, how to treat injuries, and how to survive without relying on warlords or armies.
We believe that technology for basic necessities like food, water, and medicine should be shared, not hoarded.
They run clinics while teaching kids to read, and they try to fix problems most factions prefer to ignore. They help the poor and free side and patch up people who can get caught in fights they never asked for. They're not militaristic, but they're also not weak. A lot of them used to be soldiers or scribes or even mercenaries before choosing a different path. They don't really vibe with House because he's ignoring the suffering right outside his walls. And they dislike the NCR for expansion that crushes smaller groups in its way. For the most part, they try to be neutral, but the Mojave makes that almost impossible. On the more chaotic side, you have the Fiends. They're raiders who live off of chems and whatever they can steal, which ultimately leads to violence. Their base is in Vault 3, and they spread across the southwest part of the city in scattered gangs. They're unpredictable and dangerous because they don't think long-term or care about anything beyond their next hit. The NCR hates them but can't wipe them out because orders keep them tied up at the airport. The Fiends don't ever stop causing trouble, and that makes them one of the loudest background threats in the region. And if you're asking yourself where do the Fiends get their chems, well, that would be from the Great Khans. Then we have the Powder Gangers. They're a smaller but still dangerous group. They started as prisoners working on NCR rail lines until most of the guards were redeployed for the Legion War. The inmates grabbed dynamite, blew open the facility, and split into groups. Now they run ambushes along the roads, raid caravans, and occasionally hide in old vaults. They don't have a united purpose though, because they're kinda just scavengers. They're just a loose collection of angry escapees with explosives and nothing to lose.
The NCR called it a work-release prison. We lucky prisoners got the privilege of fixing up the rail lines and blasting rock for new lines. They got sloppy though. Some of us managed to hide away some dynamite, and look who's in charge now.
All these groups competing in the same desert shape the world the Courier walks into. There's not necessarily one clean side to pick because each faction has a different idea of what the Mojave should become. Some want strict control, some want freedom, some want profits, some want revenge, and some just want to stay alive another day. That mix is what makes New Vegas feel alive, and it's why these factions will matter for anyone trying to understand the world before the Amazon show continues the story.
The second battle of Hoover Dam is at the center of the main story. Each major group moves toward it in its own way, and the Courier arrives while the situation around the region keeps building towards that point. Hoover Dam sends power and water across a wide area, and the group that takes that will likely gain control over New Vegas after the fight. The first clash of the dam ended with the NCR holding it. The Legion pulled back but stayed pretty determined on returning, and the Mojave settled into a long pause that creeps every major force towards another battle. As we know from earlier, the NCR sees the dam as a key part of its plan for the Mojave. They set up camps and stations around the area to support their hold. President Kimball places a lot of attention on the Mojave, and units near the dam work under that focus from the west. The dam supports NCR territory outside the Mojave, and that connection keeps them committed to their position. Caesar's Legion gathers strength from across the river. Caesar describes the dam as an important step in proving the direction he sets for the Legion. He directs his forces towards the Mojave, and Lannius handles the fighting tied to that advance. Legion fighters move together under a single plan as they push towards the dam. They definitely don't want to share control of the region with the NCR, and they aim to take the dam in a clear strike that forces the NCR out of the Mojave. Mr. House sees the dam as part of the system he built for New Vegas. He plans around the strip and keeps it protected with Securitrons. House wants the dam connected to his setup, so that New Vegas stays under the structure he already created. When the Courier reaches the Lucky 38, House brings them into his plan and lays out a path that removes both the NCR and the Legion from the city, and even more than that, the Mojave. Another direction might open up through Yes Man. The Courier can take control of the Securitrons at the dam and on the strip with his help. This doesn't follow NCR goals, Legion aims, or House's design. It actually gives the Courier a way to push outside the groups and take control of New Vegas independently. Certain groups in the Mojave can join the fight at the dam if the Courier builds a strong enough connection with them. The Boomers might enter the battle if they trust the Courier. The Great Khans might take part if they agree to the Courier's approach. The Enclave group at the bunker can step in as well. Each group increases the strength behind whichever side they support, and that affects how the final battle will end up. The Courier is the one who will have the final say of this conflict. They can support the NCR, help the Legion prepare their advance, strengthen House's setup, or build an independent future through Yes Man. Each decision changes the strength each side brings into the battle at the dam. When the fighting starts, the outcome comes from the pieces the Courier set in place. The group that takes the dam will make what they will of New Vegas once the war ends.
When people talk about New Vegas, they usually focus on the factions or the endings, but the real heart of the story sits in a few ideas that run under everything. The first one is simple. Nobody in the Mojave is the good guy. Every group has something that makes them look strong and something that makes them hard to trust. The NCR wants the three things most of us are used to having, such as law, taxes, and a stable government. But they spread themselves too thin and treat the Mojave like a prize instead of a home. Caesar's Legion keeps towns safe from raiders, but they build an empire on three other core principles like fear, slavery, and punishment. Mr. House brings clean power and working robots to a strip that actually functions, but he locks the future into a vision he controls from a tower. Even the smaller factions have their own set of issues too. The Boomers live peacefully inside Nellis, but fire howitzers at anyone who steps too close. The Brotherhood thinks they're saving knowledge, but hoards tech while the rest of the world struggles. The Khans hurt people through the drug trade even if they didn't start out wanting that kind of life. The Followers try to help everyone, but can't protect the people they care about. This desert, the Mojave, it pushes every faction into decisions that come with the bad side, and the Courier ends up in the middle of all of it. Now, that's where the player agency comes in. New Vegas gives you power by letting you decide who to help and who to fight, or completely ignore, but none of those decisions feel perfect. You can support the NCR and a big army with real supplies, but you watch them take land without asking. You can fight for the Legion and bring order to places full of raiders, but the cost is everything that makes life worth living. You can help Mr. House and get a future that looks clean and efficient, but it's a future controlled by one person who won't ever step outside again. You can choose Yes Man and build an independent New Vegas, but that choice also pushes out every large group that helped keep the region from falling apart in the first place. The Mojave puts all these paths in front of you and makes you think about what you're willing to trade. There's no path that comes without getting someone hurt, and that's what makes every ending feel personal. New Vegas also deals with what it means to rebuild after the world has fallen apart. The NCR thinks the answer is a growing republic that keeps expanding. They believe they're bringing stability, but the cost is stretched armies holding crushed supply lines and taxes nobody asked for. They're trying to rebuild the old world without understanding why it collapsed in the first place. Caesar looks at the same broken world and thinks the solution is to wipe away everything weak and start fresh with strict control and one leader who decides the rules. He wants to build a nation that can't fall apart because nobody inside it is allowed to question anything. Mr. House believes the world doesn't need a republic or an empire. He thinks the Mojave needs someone smart enough to run it like a business, with robots doing the work and technology carrying everyone into a stable future. Even the smaller groups have their own ideas about rebuilding. The followers try to help communities grow from the bottom up, and the boomers want security before anything else. The cons want a chance to build a future somewhere they're not being hunted, and every group is trying to build something new, but none of them agree on what the new world should look like. This leads right into the ideas of progress, order, and freedom. Mr. House represents progress at the highest level. He has numbers and machines that follow his path perfectly, but his progress doesn't care what people want, it only cares about reaching the future he designed. Caesar represents order through control. His empire removes chaos, the raiders that push more chaos, the people that push drugs, and any threat that could tear apart a town. But the price is losing choice and culture, and it means losing personal identity. The NCR represents freedom in a structured way that's more traditional of today's America. People can vote, they can own land, run businesses, and speak their mind. But that freedom also comes with red tape, corruption, shortages, and the slow grind of a government trying to do too much at once. When you look at your options, none of these choices give you everything you want. If you pick progress, you lose freedom. If you pick order, you lose personal rights. If you pick freedom, you lose stability. And every faction tries to convince you their version is worth the cost. The Mojave becomes a place where the player is constantly asked what kind of world is worth building, even if it means burning parts of the old one down. The final theme ties everything together. One person can change everything. The Courier starts as someone shot in the head and left in a shallow grave, but because every faction in the Mojave is stretched thin, the Courier becomes the tipping point. The NCR has too few troops. Caesar's Legion is waiting for their leader to fall apart. Mr. House needs someone who can walk into places his robots can't. The boomers need an outsider to reach them. The Brotherhood needs help deciding their own future. The cons can be guided toward revenge or a new start. Even the followers depend on random acts of help to keep their clinics running. The Courier can push each faction forward or hold them back. You can start wars and end wars, save towns and destroy towns, open new trade routes, break old alliances, or create new ones from nothing. Most Fallout stories deal with big world events, but New Vegas stays focused on the idea that the direction of an entire region can turn because of one person talking to the right people at the right time. Power in the Mojave isn't about holding a throne, it's about being the one who shows up when everyone else is too busy fighting. New Vegas treats every choice as something that matters because the Mojave is barely holding together. That's why the themes stand out so clearly. You aren't picking a color-coded ending. You're dealing with factions that feel real through goals that make sense, and with a region that needs leadership even if it doesn't agree on what that leadership should look like. You learn that progress has a cost and that control always takes something away. Freedom can fall apart without structure, and a single decision made by a single person can change the future for hundreds of thousands of people. These ideas carry straight into the Amazon show because they explain why the Mojave looks the way it does and why the struggle for New Vegas never stays quiet for long. It makes me wonder how Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul will mold it as they make their Mojave debut.
New Vegas has a simple story on the surface, but the bigger picture is about choice, pressure, and every major group in the Mojave thinks it knows the right way on how to rebuild the wasteland. The NCR pushes for growth and steady structure. Caesar's people push for strict control and one voice calling the shots. Mr. House wants a future that follows his plan without bending, and smaller groups are trying to survive between these bigger forces. None of them agree on what a working world should look like, and none of them trust each other enough to sit at the same table. The Courier ends up in the middle of all of this without asking for it. One job turns into a chain of events that puts them in rooms where leaders argue over power and the direction of the Mojave. What makes New Vegas special in my opinion is that the Courier never starts as a legend or a chosen figure. They're just someone who couldn't stay in their own grave. From that moment forward, everyone decides they want something from them. That makes one person into a turning point for the entire region. Whichever path they take, somebody will gain ground and somebody else loses it. Nothing comes without a trade-off, and it's that gray area where you'll struggle to pick an ending. Nobody is right or wrong, it's a bit of both for everyone. That's the real theme the show can pull from as it moves forward towards season 2. The Mojave isn't just about guns, robots, and old ruins. Leaders push their views because they believe everything will fall apart if they don't. Towns struggle while big forces watch from a distance. People are fighting not because they enjoy it, but because they think it's the only way to keep what little they have left. The Mojave keeps struggling because everyone inside it wants something different and nobody is ready to let go. Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul might be walking into a similar situation that the Courier walked through the game. Power is scattered across the land and each side chooses its own idea of a better future. Old factions might still want their goals. New groups will probably step forward. And characters who think they have their region figured out are likely to find out they don't. I hope that season 2 will dig deeper into the same ideas the game built its story around. That there is never exactly a right or wrong choice out there. The Mojave forces people to make a decision, and the show's characters are now caught in that same maze of choices. Someone is going to gain ground. Someone is going to lose something important, and every step they take will change a region that's been ready to explode for years. Well, hopefully you're ready for season 2, and you get the general premise about what is going on in New Vegas. I know a lot of you don't like the show, and a lot of the complaints are valid. Personally, I just love the Fallout universe. I can't wait to just see more about it, especially New Vegas since it's been so long. Hopefully the show doesn't ruin anything major, and I really don't know how I feel about them making it end in canon potentially, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you guys for watching, and make sure you join the Discord. You can also follow us on TikTok and me on Twitter with the links in the description. And remember, enjoyed time is never wasted time, and we'll see you in the next.